So I was thinking about this when that really good segment between Rhea and I'm sorry, Remy, between Rhea, Bianca, and Io was happening, and just sitting there and being like, okay, so we're setting this up for another triple threat match at Mania, even though this was something that we had already been talking about and knew was probably going to happen. And then I was thinking, okay, that reminds me that there are going to be at least 4 multi-man matches at WrestleMania that we can kind of predict, because we know that there's going to be this triple threat for the women's world title. We know that they're probably going to do Seth versus Punk versus Roman. We know that they're going to do their typical multi-man tag team title match. And based off of what we've been seeing over the past month, 6 weeks or so, there's going to be a multi-man IC title match. And the reason why I feel like it's lazy is because there are probably better stories that you could have gotten out of these 4 multi-man slash woman matches, instead of just making it 3 to like 6 people in the match, because you just want to make sure that all of these people are at Mania and they're on the card. And that's just how it feels, because like, I'm not saying that it doesn't make sense in every scenario. Like the multi tag team match, obviously that's been going. It's going to be Street Profits, DIY, Motor City Machine Guns, Pretty Deadly. Probably that's probably going to be the 4. But they very easily could have had Braun Breaker going into WrestleMania in like a heavy duty feud with Sheamus or something, instead of being like, let's throw you Penta and Ludwig Kaiser and Pete Dunne and maybe Finn Balor. And like, we don't need to see all of that. And there also are plenty of things that they could have done with Punk, Rollins, and Roman, instead of just throwing the 3 of them into a triple threat. We definitely could have seen Roman versus Seth. Could have held off on Punk versus Seth and had that at Mania instead of seeing it twice to this point. Definitely could have had Roman doing something else, but it feels like they must have thought it was going to be Roman versus The Rock, or they were hoping that maybe they could do Roman versus Solo, and that just didn't pan out. So they had to shift. I mean, I know that the women's match is going to be killer, but again, they very easily could have avoided having to make it into a triple threat if they just, like, I don't know, thought about it a little bit better instead of deciding that it had to be a triple threat. So to me, I just feel like it just feels lazy, because it doesn't feel like they had to do a lot of work to get there, because they don't. When you're having multi-man matches and this many of them, at least 4 that, like I said, that we feel we can predict pretty comfortably, doesn't mean that there won't be more. It's easy to make that a story because you have so many people involved. Like, you don't have to do much to make it interesting or whatever. And I don't know. Like, I don't know if I'm making any sense, but I just wish that there was a little bit more effort put into these stories, especially the ones that involve a title.
Like, you're not wrong, and I do agree with you to some extent. The way I view it is that there is so much talent on
I
the
have a
roster
counter
right now.
argument, but
There's so much depth on the roster right now and star power that it would feel like a disservice to leave them off the card at Mania. And it's not like it's WrestleMania in Minnesota or, New York. It's WrestleMania in Vegas. Vegas just has a bigger feel, or even WrestleMania Philadelphia. Like, Philadelphia isn't sexy. I've been there. I know people. They aren't sexy in Philadelphia. They're sexy in Vegas. What's sexy is having the most talent possible. And the if it comes at the extent of having multiple multi-man matches, I'm okay with it. It draws a similarity to WrestleMania 2000, when only one match on that card was a singles match, and it was the Cat versus Terry Runnels. Thank God we're not in that era where we are having more than one singles match on the card, but there are a lot of multi-man matches, and it is a weird time in WWE, because a lot of these big names and and talented stars really came into their own little bit before the Rumble, and then so after the Rumble. So we're in that weird period of time where it's just everyone's on fire. So throw them the ball and see what happens. Now, I just don't care. I'm excited.
So this is somewhat of an argument that you could make. Like, I don't know if this is how it used to be. I think that it is, and I feel in a way that it kind of makes sense to bring it back. And that is, everybody should not be guaranteed a spot at WrestleMania. Like, I think that if we're supposed to believe it's the biggest show of the year, that it's so hard to get a Mania match, and you're lucky if you get a spot on the card. Doing all of these matches where like half the roster or more, 3/4 of the roster get a Mania match, that doesn't really make it feel special. Like,
Mhm.
it used to be like, oh yeah, so and so didn't get a match at Mania. And it's like, yeah, because these other matches or these other feuds were a little bit more important. Like, yeah, they had a great year, but do they need to match at Mania? No. So I don't know. It just be kind of, it might be a little beneficial for them to get to that point where it's not trying to necessarily incorporate as many people as possible, as it is for, we want everything to make sense and be the best matches that can be possibly put on at WrestleMania. And if people are left off of it, then it is what it is. Sometimes you're not in a position to be on the card at this point. And like, I'm not trying to say anyone specifically doesn't deserve it, but like, there's a reason there's only 2 teams in the Super Bowl. Not everybody just gets to be in the Super Bowl because, oh well, they also did really well this year. It's like, no, you had to really compete to get to that point. So
Mhm.
I don't know. I mean, and I'm not saying that WrestleMania won't be good. I just, multi-man matches and having so many of them, they're not always that exciting when you have that many. And we
Mhm.
know that there are talent on the roster that are good enough to be putting on solid singles matches. And those are the kinds of things that you want to see more, because multi-man matches can be really hard to follow. And you'll miss something because you're paying attention over here and it's happening over there. And I
Mhm.
don't know.
A lot can get lost in the shuffle.
Yeah.
I can
Um,
see that. I can see that.
and so I'm seeing some people agree. Yeah, like, it used to be hard to get a Mania match. Um,
So
and
who would
that's,
you leave off the card this
well,
year? Like,
I'm
no,
not
just for example purposes. No, just no, just example purposes. Like, someone that has been taught. Like, okay, I'll give an example. I'll throw it up. Would it make sense to leave Penta off the Mania card this year,
I
or would you
mean,
rather see him get thrown into a multi-man match?
I feel it. I mean, I feel Penta hasn't done enough necessarily in WWE to get a Mania match as quickly as he's going to, but I feel like, can you really pass on the opportunity to have Penta at Mania? No. But I'm just saying, like, I
Mhm.
because like, I would have to sit there and actually break it down, because I'm not saying these people don't deserve it, but I'm saying,
Correct. I
like,
know. Yeah.
do we really need to have 6 people in an IC title match? No. Like, Braun Breaker could very easily have a one-on-one match with Sheamus, or maybe he goes one-on-one with Penta, or maybe at the most do a triple threat the way they did with Gunther, McIntyre, and Sheamus 2 years ago. There's like, that is even more intriguing. Like, at least a triple threat is easier to pay attention to, and I would still prefer a singles match, but I'm just saying things like that. Like, we don't have to just throw everybody on here. It's just because in the instance of the IC title, you decided to not have Braun Breaker really do anything since you gave him back the title from Jey Uso. So he hasn't
Mhm.
had a proper opportunity to actually have a storyline in a feud that made sense for him to have a singles title run at WrestleMania. Instead, you've been having all this other stuff going on. And they're like, oh, we want to go for the IC title. But Braun Breaker was always like in the back seat, just watching everybody do it. And then they're like, we're going to put them in the Intercontinental title scene. But they didn't even have any more than a backstage interaction with Braun. So that's what I mean. Like, we very easily
Mhm.
could have adjusted our focus, still had these other guys doing a match, doing matches and stuff, but they didn't necessarily have to be at Mania. Like,
Mhm.
I would rather see like Ludwig Kaiser have his WrestleMania debut in like a big one-on-one IC title match than him being
See,
thrown
that
into a
was
6-man match. You know what I
yeah. See,
mean?
that was the thing. That's the person that sticks out to me.
Mhm.
that if left off the Mania card, I wouldn't I
Most
wouldn't
people
blink
wouldn't
twice.
notice.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
wouldn't blink twice, but if he's in a singles match for the IC title on the card,
Mhm.
I'm seated and locked in. So
Well, and
it's just all about what makes sense at that time.
and we were just talking about how, like, Liv Morgan was the women's world champion, but like she didn't have a prominent role at last year's WrestleMania. Damian Priest became the world heavyweight champion at last year's WrestleMania, but he wasn't on the card. So it's like it's not saying that these people aren't deserving or they haven't worked hard or that they're not a draw or whatever you want to say, but it's also like, do we really need to see Drew McIntyre versus Damian Priest? No, but they just want they want Damian Priest on WrestleMania, so they're like, okay, well, let's revisit what we did last year, So it's like it's moments like that where it's like Drew could have had a much bigger match. Like we could have seen Drew versus Roman or something, and that feels more like WrestleMania than him
It
versus
does.
Damian Priest. I don't know. I guess I kind of want to have that feeling again where it's like this is a match that should be at Mania, not just like, oh yeah, this was a Mania match that you're gonna forget about tomorrow when you're watching night two. Like I don't know. I don't know if I'm like I said, I don't know if I'm explaining myself the way that I
No, I get
want
it.
to, but
It makes sense.